There is a scene in The Wire that people who have never even watched the show have seen. A woman walks into a hardware store, Home Depot. She is small, quiet, dressed like a teenage boy. She walks up to the counter and asks the clerk about a nail gun, the most powerful one they sell. The clerk starts explaining the specs, how many nails per minute, what kind of charge it uses, how deep the nail goes, and the woman listens, calm, patient, like she is buying a lawnmower. Then she pays, cash, and walks out with a tool that she is about to use for something the clerk will never know about. The scene is famous because of what it does not say. It does not explain what the nail gun is for. It does not show you. It lets your imagination fill in the blank, and your imagination goes somewhere darker than any camera could. The actress in that scene is a woman named Felicia Pearson. The show calls her Snoop. She plays one of the coldest enforcers in the history of television, a member of Marlo Stanfield's crew. A character so calm, so flat, so eerily unbothered by what she carries out that audiences assumed the performance was the work of a trained, disciplined actor who had studied the role for months. She was not a trained actor. She had never taken an acting class. She had never been on a set before. She had never read a script before the one David Simon handed her. And the calm you see on screen, the flat affect, the stillness that made Snoop one of the most terrifying characters in television history, was not a performance. It was memory. Because before Felicia Pearson played an enforcer on The Wire, she was convicted of second degree at the age of 14, tried as an adult, sentenced, served over 6 years in a women's facility in Maryland. She walked out in her early 20s with a record, no education, no prospects, and no reason to believe that the world outside the walls would be any different from the one that put her inside them. She was not acting on The Wire. She was remembering. And this is the story of the woman behind the character, the real Snoop. This is that story. Start with where she came from. Because the story of Felicia Pearson does not begin with a casting call. It begins in a place most people do not survive. East Baltimore, 1980. Felicia Pearson is born into a world that has already given up on her before she takes her first breath. Both of her biological parents are in the grip of addiction. Her mother is using while pregnant. When Felicia is born, she is premature. She weighs less than 3 pounds. She is born addicted. The hospital keeps her alive. The state takes her immediately. She is placed in foster care before she is old enough to know what foster care means. And here is the first thing you need to understand about Felicia Pearson's life, because it frames everything that comes after. East Baltimore in the 80s is not a neighborhood, it is a system, a machine that takes in children and sorts them based on what is available, not what they need. The row houses look the same from the outside. Brick fronts, marble steps that the old women still scrub on Saturday mornings because that is what their mothers did. Churches on every third corner, the architecture of a place that used to work. But inside those row houses, the crack epidemic is dismantling families faster than any institution can respond. Mothers are disappearing into addiction. Fathers are absent or locked up. Grandmothers are raising children they do not have the energy or the resources to keep safe. The foster system is overwhelmed. Caseworkers have caseloads that would take 3 people to manage, and the children who fall through the cracks do not fall into a safety net. They fall into the street. Felicia falls into the street. She was not failed by one system. She was failed by all of them at the same time. The family system failed her at birth. The foster system took her in and moved her around. The school system saw a kid acting out and responded with punishment, not help. The streets saw a child who needed protection and offered the only kind they had. East Baltimore in the 80s and 90s is not a place that raises children. It is a place that sorts them. If you are lucky, if you have one stable adult in your orbit, if you land in the right foster home, if you connect with the right teacher, you might get sorted towards something that looks like a life. If you are unlucky, if every adult around you is either absent or broken, if the only structure you can find is the structure the corner provides, you get sorted the other way. Felicia got sorted the other way. By her early teens, she is in the streets, not because she chose the life, because the life is the only thing that chose her. She is small, she is tough. She carries herself with a hardness that most adults do not develop until their 30s, and she is 13. 14. A child with the eyes of someone who has already seen too much. And then at 14, the worst thing happens. The details are documented through her own account and through the court record. A confrontation with another girl, a fight in the street, the kind of fight that, in a different neighborhood, ends with a bloody nose and a suspension from school. In East Baltimore in 1994, it ends differently. The other girl does not survive. Felicia Pearson, 14 years old, is charged with second degree. The state of Maryland tries her as an adult. An adult. She is 14. She is convicted. She is sentenced to 2 concurrent 8-year terms. She is sent to the Maryland Correctional Institution for Women in Jessup, a women's prison. She is a child, and the women around her are grown, with grown convictions and grown histories and grown pain. Think about what that means for a 14-year-old girl. You are in a facility designed for adults. The women around you are in their 20s, 30s, 40s. Some of them have been inside for years. They have their own hierarchies, their own rules, their own ways of surviving. And you are a child dropped into the middle of it, expected to navigate a world that grown women struggle with. In her memoir, Grace After Midnight, Felicia described those years with a flatness that tells you more than any dramatic retelling could. She did not romanticize the experience. She did not describe some Hollywood awakening behind bars. She described survival, day by day, learning how to move, learning how to carry herself, learning when to speak and when to be silent and when to make herself small enough that nobody noticed her. She served over 6 years. She went in as a child. She came out as a young woman, but the world she came out into had not been waiting for her. She serves over 6 years. Think about what 6 years means when you are 14. You go in as a child. You come out as a young woman. But the world you come out into has not been waiting for you. It has moved on. The friends you had are gone or changed or locked up themselves. The education you missed is a gap that nobody is offering to fill. The record you carry follows you into every job application, every apartment search, every conversation where someone asks what you have been doing for the last 6 years. Felicia comes out in her early 20s. She has no degree, no trade, no connections to any world outside of Baltimore's streets. She works dead-end jobs. She struggles. And the pull of the street, the only world she has ever known, is always there, always offering the one thing the legitimate world will not give her: familiarity. And then, on a night she could not have predicted, something happens that changes the entire trajectory of her life. She walks into a nightclub in Baltimore, and standing across the room is a man she has never met. A tall, intense man with a scar on his face who carries himself like he knows something the rest of the room does not. His name is Michael K. Williams, and he is about to become one of the most celebrated actors in television history. He plays a character named Omar Little on a show called The Wire, a stick-up man who robs the men who move the product. A character so beloved, so magnetic, so impossibly alive that audiences will debate for decades whether Omar is the greatest character in the history of television. Williams and Pearson talk. And Williams, who grew up in the projects of East Flatbush, Brooklyn, who carries his own scars, who understands the language of the streets the way only someone who has lived in them can, recognizes something in Felicia immediately. She is the real thing, not an actor playing tough, not a performer with a backstory she researched at a library. The real thing, the hardness, the stillness, the flat calm that comes from having survived something most people will never experience, and knowing that nothing in a nightclub or a casting room or a television set will ever be as dangerous as what she has already been through. Williams brings her to Simon. David Simon is the creator of The Wire, a former Baltimore Sun reporter who spent years covering the city's streets and its institutions and its failures. Simon built The Wire on a principle that no other show in television had ever committed to with the same discipline: authenticity. He cast real Baltimore, not actors from New York playing Baltimore characters, real people from the city. Melvin Williams, the kingpin who inspired the character of Avon Barksdale, appears in the show as a reformed community figure called the Deacon, a real kingpin, playing a reformed character in a show based on his own life. Donnie Andrews, the real stick-up man who inspired Omar Little, consulted on the show and later married the writer who helped create the character. Andrews had jumped 6 floors from a building during a real confrontation. The show made it 4 because the writers thought 6 would seem unbelievable. The Wire did not just tell Baltimore's story, it used Baltimore's actual people to tell it. And when Michael K. Williams brought Felicia Pearson to Simon, Simon saw exactly what Williams saw: a woman whose entire life was the thing his writers were trying to put on paper. A woman who did not need to study the world of Marlo Stanfield's crew because she had lived in that world since she was old enough to walk. He cast her as Snoop. No audition tape, no acting reel, no agent, no manager. A woman who had been convicted at 14 and served 6 years walked onto the set of the most acclaimed drama on television and became one of its most iconic characters. She appeared in seasons 3, 4, and 5, 23 episodes. And from the first frame she was on screen, something was different. The other actors on The Wire were extraordinary: Idris Elba, Dominic West, Wendell Pierce, Andre Royo, Lance Reddick, some of the finest dramatic actors of their generation, delivering performances that changed the standard of what television could be. And Felicia Pearson, with 0 training, held the screen against all of them. Not by being louder, not by being more dramatic, by being less. That is the thing people miss about what made Snoop work. Every other actor on the show is performing. They are brilliant at it, but they are reaching for something. They are using craft and technique and years of training to inhabit characters who are not them. Felicia is not reaching for anything. She is already there. She has been there since she was 14. The flatness that the audience reads as menace is not a choice. It is what a person sounds like when the capacity for surprise has been removed by experience. When nothing on a television set, no matter how intense the scene, no matter how high the stakes, can come close to what you have already lived through. And here is the detail that tells you exactly how real her presence was. The other actors noticed. In interviews after the show ended, multiple cast members talked about what it was like to work opposite Felicia. They used the same word over and over: authentic. Not talented, not skilled. Authentic. Because in a room full of people pretending to be something, she was the one person who was not pretending. The nail gun scene is the one everyone remembers, but the scene that tells you who Snoop really is comes later, in the final season. When Snoop's time on the show comes to an end, she is sitting in a car, and she looks in the rearview mirror and asks a question. A simple question, about how she looks. It is the only moment of vulnerability the character ever shows, the only moment where the mask slips. And it is devastating because you realize in that second that Snoop is not a monster. She is a human being who has been turned into a tool by a world that never offered her anything else. Felicia did not study that moment in an acting class. She lived it. The show ended in 2008, and here is where the story takes the turn that should break your heart but probably will not surprise you, because The Wire ended. The cameras stopped rolling, the set was packed up, the actors went back to their lives, and Felicia Pearson went back to hers. And hers was East Baltimore. The show had made her famous, it had not made her rich. Television actors on HBO ensemble dramas do not earn what people think they earn, especially actors who are not series regulars, who have no agent negotiating back-end deals, who came to the show with no leverage and no representation. Felicia had fame. She did not have a safety net. In 2011, 3 years after The Wire ended, federal agents executed a sweep in Baltimore targeting a distribution network. Among those arrested was Felicia Pearson. She was charged with conspiracy to distribute. The same world The Wire had depicted, the same streets she had grown up on, the same cycle the show had tried to expose, had pulled her back in. She pleaded guilty. She was sentenced to supervised probation and community service. She avoided going back inside. But the arrest itself told the world the thing The Wire had been saying for 5 seasons. The systems that fail people do not stop failing them when the cameras show up. They do not stop when the critics write their reviews and call the show a masterpiece. They do not stop when a woman from East Baltimore becomes famous for playing a version of herself on television and then goes home to the same blocks that made her who she is. The Wire won awards for showing America the truth about cities like Baltimore. Felicia Pearson was living that truth. And when the show ended and the truth was no longer profitable, she went back to the only world that had ever claimed her. Michael K. Williams, the man who discovered her at the nightclub, the man who brought her to David Simon, the man who played Omar, was found on September the 6th, 2021, found in his Brooklyn apartment. He was 54 years old. The man who changed Felicia Pearson's life by seeing something real in her at a nightclub. The man whose character, Omar Little, was inspired by a real stick-up man named Donnie Andrews, who himself was gone by 2012. 3 real lives, all tangled together in a show about how the streets consume the people who walk them. And Felicia, the real Snoop. She wrote a memoir in 2007 called Grace After Midnight. She told her story in her own words. The foster care, the streets, the conviction at 14, the prison, the nightclub, The Wire, the arrest after. She has been open about her life in a way that most people in her position never are. She does not hide from the conviction. She does not pretend the arrest in 2011 did not happen. She does not perform redemption for the cameras the way television teaches people to perform it. She tells the truth, the same way she told it on The Wire. Flat, calm, without apology, without drama. The way a person tells a story they have lived so deeply that the telling itself has no emotion left in it. So what do you take from the life of Felicia Pearson? Take this. A girl was born addicted in East Baltimore in 1980. She was taken from her mother before she could open her eyes. She was moved through a foster system that did not protect her. She was sorted by the streets into the only life that would have her. She was convicted at 14 and served 6 years in a grown woman's prison. And then a man saw her at a nightclub and recognized something in her that Hollywood had spent millions trying to fake. She walked onto the set of the greatest television drama ever made, and she did not act. She remembered. And what she remembered was so real, so still, so terrifyingly authentic that audiences assumed she must be the most disciplined performer in the cast. She was not. She was the least trained person on that set. And she was the most convincing, because the distance between Felicia Pearson and the character she played was not a performance. It was nothing. They were the same person. The show just gave her a script to hold.